All right, we are back on the SuccessFlow podcast, and it's been a wild month of July. We've been traveling quite a bit. It's good to get back and record. We did some pre-recordings before. We had some awesome guests, and now we're excited to get back at it into a better or more stronger routine, if you will. Before we get into the bamboo banger, though, just off the cuff, how have you been, my friend?
I am fantastic. Honestly, fantastic. I am excited to record today. Didn't realize how much I'd miss it. We were grinding week to week.
Yeah, you were
taking that break. Yes. We were also going back and being able to review some game tape, listen to some of our episodes. I think we, ready to take this to the next level with, I think, mainly the guest and just authentic conversations. We've been doing this. We're in the 60s now in episode. This is episode 63,
64-ish, somewhere around there. We'll see when it gets out.
Somewhere around there. But one of the listeners brought that up. They're like, 64 episodes, or some new folks at the podcast. It's like, yeah, we've been doing this for a while. We're enjoying it, but it's time to level it up. And we've got some good guests coming that way. But before we do, love the topic you came up with today. And I was like, have we even done this specifically? Because we kind of take it for granted, but I loved it when you broached it. So lay it on us, brother.
All right. Bamboo Banger is all about corny inspiration that works and coupled with work ethic. So the reason why I thought of this topic was because when you're out traveling and you're out of your normal routine, you need that self-motivation, that self-inspiration to keep going and remaining on your path, right? And so a lot of the inspiration can come across as corny, and things like motivational quotes or people you follow on Instagram or things you hear, YouTube videos, and you're like, just actors or celebrities or whatever putting together videos or saying certain things. Like there's that, I think you follow them too on Instagram, the Iron Will Project. Like I love that page. It's like they usually have a celebrity or they have somebody on, and they usually have a male voice that's kind of like, time to get after it and, doing all these different things. And like you scroll through their pages and it just kind of keeps you going. And it's corny and it's cliche, but it does absolutely help. And then also when you're out of sorts a little bit, not in your normal day-to-day routines, your work ethic shines through, whether it's good or bad. And so having that foundation of strong work ethic and how you build strong work ethic will allow you to continue to be successful in your life and obviously in the work that you do. Because, we were traveling, but it's not like, my business stopped. It's not like we didn't have any work to do. So you have to continue that work ethic. So that's the topic, talking about corny inspiration that works for you and what works for me, and then work ethic and how we develop that strong work ethic.
Yeah, I love it. Again, I think that we take work ethic as table stakes. Like it's kind of taken for granted. But when this podcast is for people that are making, midlife changes and starting to define success for yourself. And I remember when I was first, going down the path, I was a little embarrassed about it. Like it was in the closet about my motivational stuff that was getting me rolling, but I needed it. It's almost like a caffeine jolt. If nothing else is working, you have to change your state. And sometimes the corniest stuff, it just simply works. And you see this all the way up at the highest level until it becomes your default, right? I think that's it. And sometimes even when you are cruising in your processes and your mindset's on point, you dip into those slumps, and the motivational stuff, the cheesy stuff, the Tony Robbins, it works. And desperate times call for desperate measures. So I love it and look forward to diving in.
Yeah. Tony, have you ever seen Tony Robbins live?
I haven't. And
it's insane. So I went to a 1 day conference. Tony Robbins was there.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It was years ago, 5 years ago, maybe. And Tony Robbins was like the keynote guy, and he was on for 4 hours. 4 hours. Like the morning was like Gary Vee, Hershevek from Shark Tank, and then a couple other your real estate typical type of like, hey, buy my program type stuff. But the keynote was Tony Robbins for 4 freaking hours. And that guy had the room so engaged, so fired up. You were like hugging random people. Like if you go to any one of his events, they're just the most inspiring, most motivational. You have no choice but to go out there into the world and kill it. You just have so much blood pumping through you in your adrenaline to just want to go crush it in life. And that's where the work ethic comes in, because a lot of what he does is cheesy and it's corny, but it works so well, but it's temporary if you don't have the work ethic to go implement. And so you have to have that ability to take all the things that you learn, take that fire in you, and build it and implement and do the things that you have been striving to do. And don't let those let those flurries of excitement wear off after 48 hours. And so many people do that. But Tony Robbins is awesome, man. If you ever get a chance to go see him live, I heard he does like week-long retreats that have got to just be insane. Almost probably to the point where it's uncomfortable, but it's got to be. I mean, people pay thousands and thousands of dollars, and then people pay him millions of dollars to be his one-on-one coach. I mean, he's obviously the guru.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you see Sean from My First Million talk
Sean
about
Perry?
it, changed his life, and he broke down a whole episode on specifically why Tony Robbins changed his life and how. And you look at what he's achieved. If he's still on board with it, it's got to work. When we started looking at this topic and I was thinking about what we wanted to talk about, I was going to the concept of A players and B players and seeing the positives and negatives on both sides. Now, starting with the B players, sometimes it is simply just work ethic and you need to do more and have a sense of urgency to solve your problems at hand. You know what I mean? It's a volume issue. It's a focus issue. Do more, do it more urgency, because a lot of times B players can lack urgency and they need to put more effort into their performance.
Yeah.
But you also have our type A players that can be a little perfectionistic, moving too fast, thinking about the future a little too much. And some of those players that have work ethic, there's no question there, but may need to slow down, be a little more intentional, and look at the big picture. With some of the stuff that just judging by my own problems that I've had, that's what led me to meditation, mindfulness, slowing down, being present in the moment. So it's a double-edged sword, right? You're trying to find that sweet spot of not necessarily a type A, type B, because people aren't as easily categorically, management and coaches will try to categorize people that way, but there's a little bit of both. And so I was just thinking about that, on how sometimes repetition and urgency can solve a lot of your problems if you're just, starting to take a look in the mirror on how you can improve your life. But was curious about your thoughts there.
Yeah, I think I can't remember who it was, following Cody Sanchez and Alex Hormozy. If you're listening and not following those two, definitely do it. They're savages in business and they spew a lot of inspiration, and they talk about, I can't remember which one said it, but it was talking about A players and B players. And it's like 5 B players won't solve your problem if you have 1 A player. Like it's like 1 A player equals 5 B players. Like either way, it'll work itself out. But I think what the purpose of that was saying, to your point, a lot of times B players, yeah, they may work hard, but they may not work efficient. And then they shut it down right at 5 o'clock and you can't get a hold of them until the next morning, right? They're not the above and beyond. They're getting the job done, but it's not the above and beyond. The A player is above and beyond and doing all the things, but are they working efficiently and are they getting burnt out? And so that's where you kind of have that give and take. But talk about corny inspiration. Like 2 years ago, meditation was corny to me. Like sitting in a room in silence, and like that was like, who meditates? It was like woo woo, right? And it's like you have that mindset shift of how that stuff actually works, and you can tap into your subconscious and you can inspire and motivate yourself. You know who else did this? Have you been watching the Netflix show Receiver?
No.
You been watching that yet? Okay, so Greg Kittle's on there. So Greg Kittle's on there, and he talks about how he sits every single game, and there's like one of those scenes where he's like sitting in regular motion, and like there's people and the crowd's all flying behind him, right? You know what I'm talking about, where it's all like fast motion behind him, but he's just like calm and just kind of giving off the idea, the feeling that he's in like a meditative state. He meditates and is in silence before every single game. He sits on the bench and he says it's a way to pump himself up and to get ready for the game. to have that moment to himself. And he's just sitting there, he's just kind of like rubbing his thighs, and he's just going through his motions and doing it. And he's in that meditative state. Well, there was a scene also where he was in the hotel room with his dad and his mom and his wife, and them four had their heads together, and his dad, you got to listen to this, dude. You're going to like just gush over how his dad spoke this whole like basically 3-minute mantra of we're going to be on Lincoln Field. And I think it was a prayer, but it was very much motivational, very much strength driven, and very meditative of like, I got to tap into my inner being to become the beast that I need to be out into the world. And I just thought that was so cool. And a lot of it sounds corny. And I love that this is coming out like into mainstream sports. Yeah. So you got to check that out. It's a really cool episode.
It just went up on my list, and we've been talking about it in our household often. I know that we try to avoid politics on this podcast, and that's not head in the sand. We did an episode on that, but I'm finding it creeping into my periphery, just given, my line of work has a lot to do with capital markets and what's going on with regulation. And it's been creeping in, and I just keep driving back to the fundamentals and talking with Paula about it, how it starts in our life. Our world is reflective of our inner place, and talking about everything that's going on, whether it's right or left, we have to bring it back to what we can control and what is within the day-to-day actions we can take to make everything that we touch better. If we start working with that perspective, and back to service, we talked about that a lot in our retreat to Peru, is like, we feel our best, or I feel my best when I'm serving others. Yes, we have to earn money, and in a sales organization, you are driving revenue. But when it comes from an act of service, or with Junto trying to put on a killer summit, this is service, and it's when you feel the best. And things tend to solve themselves when you're working on serving others and serving your mission. So just another thing that's been top of mind in regard to work ethic, reframing it, and how can I go inward to do it? So, that's a little bit off topic, but we're bringing it home.
Well, and I think, like when you've got your plate full, I think we did, life is full, right? You're not busy, life is full, and you've got a lot of things going on. But you got to get it all done. Gamifying it helps with your work ethic. Mm-hmm. It's like tracking the progress and how many points can I get today? How can I gamify this project that I got to work on, even if I don't really want to, right? Like a lot of what goes into work ethic is like, you don't really want to do this specific thing, but you know that you get to, or you have to, in order to achieve what your ultimate goal is. Like when you hear about Allen Iverson, right? Like practice. What are we talking about? Practice? Like, a lot of those guys don't want to practice, but they want to play the game and win the championships, but they have to practice. And so they gamify their practice. How many hours did I put in today? How many points did I get? And then they track it, right? And that's how you keep up that work ethic, is when you can see the progress in your work. And so Absolutely. I think that's and I love how, obviously sports is a big thing, and we got the Olympics going on, and you got a lot of those, there's no single Olympian out there that would have been, that's in that position without work ethic. And there's just drive that some people just have the innate ability to have this drive at all costs. They will do whatever it takes, but that can also be developed when you see the little successes and the little progresses throughout your day or throughout your week. Everyone has this drive. When you start aligning yourself with who you are, where you want to go, and you figured out how to get there, and you start seeing that progress, then that motivation, that drive, that anything you see out into the world, that quote that you read, it means something a little bit more because you're on this train and we're going to keep it rolling. Absolutely.
I think it's so awesome because as we're talking about gamifying and putting these processes into play, was just in Michigan this past week with a buddy who will hopefully be coming on the podcast soon. It's been in talks for a while, but he's with a really large organization in Detroit. And when we started the year, we were also traveling in Pebble Beach, and we were really breaking down essentialism and talking about the theme of the year was cutting down, which we've talked about on this podcast a lot. It's a key pillar in my life, is how can I do more with less? But recently I've been gamifying living by this size of a notebook has been my MO. And recently it's been like, as I look down at my notebook, I'm like, there's not enough space here, checking things off. I've just recently just needed more space. So grabbed a legal pad and just expanded the same process from my notebook and going nuts. And yes, it's not necessarily essentialism because I have more space and more places to reference, but it's been really helpful transferring the ideas, going nuts on a legal pad to gain order so I can get back to less is more. And it's been a little tweak in game. And it's little stuff like that where you're moving the needle, changing up processes, whatever it takes to refresh and go. And that's not necessarily cheesy. It's more practical, but constantly reiterating this game to play it better, to play it more effectively and optimize life. Not for the sake of doing more or necessarily more material things, but just to live a better life is what we're trying to get to. And I love it.
Yeah, one of the ways I think, it's worked for me. So and I know it works for you. It's got to work for others. And something that's corny is it's cliche to have the morning routine. It's cliche to say, I say I am statements. I am, affirmations. It's cliche to say that I journal and reflect every night. And that all sounds corny to people who aren't actually doing those things, but those things actually work. When you start building the habit to putting that into your life, it takes zero effort to add this to your life. So and you're doing it all by yourself. No one knows that you're doing it unless you share it with them. And it just completely changes your perspective on the day. And then when you reflect at the end of the day, like all of your wins from gamifying the day and stacking those wins, and then you have that progress, it continues to build the confidence. And so the I am statements are huge. Like you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, I am capable. I am a mother effing beast. I am jumping at opportunity that aligns. You say that to yourself every single day. And all of a sudden now you're more aware, you're more confident, you're in your peripherals, you're focused on the things you're working on, and then your peripherals, you start seeing opportunities everywhere. And now you're jumping at the things that align and make a lot of sense. And you start seeing that progress, and then you gamify it, and it continues down that path. But I am statements, man, like those are, do you have those in the morning? Do you say those? Do you have a morning mantra?
So I do, and I'm saying them in the sauna, the cold plunge, but they've become, when you start reprogramming your subconscious mind, you get to a point where you've done the reprogramming and you have changed your identity. And that was the ones we did a whole episode on the alter ego. You want to talk about cheesy, Beyonce calling herself Sasha Fierce. Well, you might call that cheesy, but it's resulted in, I think, over $1 billion, obviously in sales over $1 billion, but net worth wise, who she's become, you can call that cheesy all you want, but the alter ego, like mine, like it's fluctuated, but Flow Sniper, which kind of leads us into some of the military things that I wanted to cover on this episode. It makes me show up differently. I'm methodical. I'm planning. I'm super diligent. And that's one thing, like the military, going down the books that we've covered here on Can't Hurt Me and Discipline Equals Freedom, that mindset, when I think of hard work and work ethic, I think of the military, the conditions that they put themselves in and still have attention to detail on how well their bed's made, that there's not a speck of dirt in their living space while they're going through Hell Week. Like that, you can call that cheesy, the way Jocko's getting up at 4:30 and driving people to be better by their attention to their discipline, but it works. And that's where the overlap I think of is like of this, what is cheesy motivation and rah-rah paired with work ethic. That's where it's at. There is a very clear Venn diagram of the overlap there, and it's effective.
Yeah, there's a lot of people. Positive self-talk is a huge deal, and it keeps up. You translate that into your work ethic. But I remember did a Sandler sales training way back when I was like early in my sales career. And at some of those meetings, like one of the things they would tell us is like, come up with your sales mantra in a way, like before you go into a discovery call or before you go into a demo or before you go into a proposal meeting or a closing or whatever, what's your mantra? And I don't quite remember what mine was, but I do remember the example they gave. And it was just like, I'm a heat-seeking missile that will stop at nothing until my target is met, like until I nail my target. And I just thought that was like yeah, like let's go, right? Like you just kind of pump yourself up because you have corny inspiration, you have other people that'll give you that. But when it comes from within and you're telling yourself that you're capable of these things and you're a heat-seeking missile and you're a beast, and that all sounds very corny, but that stuff works. And some of the most successful, most famous and wealthiest people in the world have positive self-talk ongoing every single day because success is temporary and they know that.
Be it till you see it. It's all about, what is your ideal state? What are the things that you want to achieve? And if you're feeling those emotions, and it's not necessarily the outcome, right? We talked about this on the podcast before. It's not the end result. It's visualizing you doing the work. How does it feel when you're in the middle of the run, when you've got blisters on your feet and Mel Robbins says your AirPods go out? Feel that feeling and see yourself moving past it and keeping it, take one step at a time. The next action. So I think that here's another one, the tattoos. I have, tattoos on my body that most people would say cheesy. The memento mori with the pocket watch on my arm, like cheesy. A lot of people will make fun of that. Oh, you're going to regret that. You need that on your arm. It works for me. I look down at my arm and remember that I only have a limited amount of time on this planet. A lot of people say it's cheesy. It's permanently on my body. I don't give a rip.
Yeah. And that goes back to no one's going to know about this stuff, but like do whatever works for you. You're not living this life for anybody else. Do the things that work for you. And most of this stuff you can do by yourself. Be open-minded to trying some of this stuff. It will help with the work ethic of whatever it takes attitude, the grit that you have to power through, the endurance that you need to achieve your dreams and able to continue on through those challenging times. Whenever, because they're always going to come. When you have growth and you're not stagnant, when you're out of your comfort zone, it's always going to feel challenging and you're always going to need that motivation. You're always going to need that inspiration, and it wears off after 24 hours. Even if you get like a big conference, like we talked about earlier, it'll wear off. If you read a quote, it's going to wear off in 30 seconds. Right. And so you have to be able to implement that and take the things that you read and then get after it.
Speaking of quotes, that couldn't have been more on time. I got two. One specifically stuck out to me in regard to you for opportunity and everything that I'm sure you've used it before, but I couldn't recall a specific time. But the famous Thomas Edison quote, opportunity is often missed because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work. How many times have opportunities been there and you literally have a visceral feeling of how much work it's going to be. So you shuffle it down, you kick it down the field for a later time. And then the other one for this podcast is the only place success comes before work is in the dictionary. Since we're on cheesy, SuccessFlow podcast, that's the perfect quote for summarizing the thoughts of this episode.
I agree. I think that's the pod. Subscribe, like, follow. We'll be at you next week.